So the title of this talk this morning is The Pursuit of Unhappiness. So I'm going to look at how and why we chase happiness. Do we want to change this? And if so, how we might go about it. So this talk comes with a warning. There is absolutely nothing new in this talk. You know it all already. I'm not teaching you anything. I've got nothing earth-shattering to say. It's just a ramble about what I'm focusing on at the moment. So you could think of this as just a simple reminder of things you already know, but I'm hoping also this talk might serve to show people that these talks do not need to be Shakespeare. It doesn't need to be or not to be, it doesn't have to be proof that you're a great Buddhist or that you practice deeply or you know what you're talking about. It can just be, hey, this is what I'm looking at. Maybe this is interesting to you. Because we are in danger of losing these talks as a regular every Saturday morning thing if we don't have enough mantras and order members to give them. So hopefully when you listen to this ramble, you realise it's not as daunting as you might think. So what I've been looking at is what Buddha called the poisons. There's 3 poisons, he said, and these are the 3 negative qualities of the mind that cause most of our problems and most of the problems in society. And they are greed, also known as clinging or grasping, hatred, or sometimes we call that aversion, pushing away, and the third is delusion or ignorance. So these are the main 3 things we need to be aware of that our mind does. It grabs, it pushes, and it really doesn't understand reality. So I'll be looking at the 2 of those today, the grabbing and the pushing away. And I'd like to highlight that these are poisons. The Buddha called them poisons. He didn't call them splinters. They're not mild irritants. These are things that have potential to pollute our entire being. Just like when you get bitten by an animal, the poison will travel through your whole system if you don't put something like a compression bandage on. So if you don't pay attention to it, it can get worse. And it's the same with this grasping and pushing away. And that's what I'm encouraging you to do today, to pay attention to it. Because if you don't pay attention to this tendency to grasp or the tendency to push away, I've found it does get worse. So for example, a grasping for things. The more I want, the more I want. And so the more things I want, the more things I get. And the more things I get, the more things I want. And it just never ends. So when I first decided, okay, I'm not going to take public transport anymore, I want a car, get a car. And then short time later, actually, this car is not quite big enough, I want a bigger one. And then after a while, actually, I think I need 360-degree cameras so I can park properly. It just never ends. It's always more. And statistically, apparently, we will always want 25% more. So we are never quite satisfied. So no matter what we're grabbing for, it's not going to make us happy because we will always want more. And it seems to be the same with the pushing away as well. The more you don't want something, the more you don't want something. For an example, there's that colleague at work that starts off as being mildly irritating, and then it's just, it's just they speak loudly on the phone, and then it's that they tap their foot, and then it's that they want the air conditioning on a different setting, and then it's, and the more annoying they get, the more annoying they get. So it all grows. So the point I'm trying to make is these poisons, we have to pay attention to them. Otherwise, that habit of grasping and pushing just gets more and more and more. So I was thinking about this, about paying attention to that grasping, the pushing away, and thinking, why do we do that? Why do we crave things? Why do we push things away? And I'm pretty sure it's because we think in doing that, we will achieve happiness. We kind of seem to think, and I include myself in this, kind of seem to think that these little bits of pleasure that we're grasping at, or displeasure that we're pushing away, we can kind of pile them on top of each other like bricks. of this pleasure and that pleasure and this pleasure and that pleasure and build this wall of happiness. But it doesn't seem to work like that. I mean, happiness is one of the main drivers in our life. We're always trying to achieve it, grab it, keep it, not lose it, build it. And our modern society has, more conveniences and more pleasures than ever before. It seems to be less satisfied than ever before historically. I think we're taking more antidepressants than ever before. But so as human beings, I'm really not sure that we understand, well, what gives us happiness. We think it's the things that give us pleasure, that are pleasurable. It's like it's things like the big house, the car, the job, the relationship, family, the big four. But even if we get those things we're grasping after, or manage to avoid the things that we don't want, any feeling of satisfaction or happiness that we get from that is not long lasting. Studies show that we have a set point of happiness and we don't really change from that. And everything normalizes. So you'll get the big house, but after a while, it's just that's normal now. And your happiness set level goes back to this set point. So there was some research done that was really interesting. It's usually about 2 years after, it can be something huge like winning the lottery or getting married. And 2 years later, it normalizes, you're back to that same set level of happiness. And conversely, something terrible can happen, like losing a loved one, or even losing a limb. And your set point goes back to, it normalizes, and you go back to being as happy as you ever were. So I was thinking about this and thinking about, well, knowing that I grasp after these little things, pleasures, grasp things and push things away all the time, because I think by massaging and managing my life in that way, I'm going to make myself happy. Well, how do I stop doing that? How do I become aware and stop myself grasping? And I was thinking, well, what I've done in the past is I try to do the opposite of something, and sometimes that works. So say, for example, and this is quite a silly example, with mosquito bites. When I get a mosquito bite, I would scratch and scratch and scratch. I could have just stopped. You can tell yourself, don't scratch, but it never works. So I thought to myself, well, how do I stop scratching? Well, do the opposite. So what is the opposite of scratching? No, it's not. It's something that's active, that's not scratching. It's tickling. So when I get a mosquito bite, I don't scratch it, and that stops it itching. Anyway, so that's what I do. So I was thinking, well, what can I do to stop myself grasping for pleasure, thinking it's happiness, grasping for pleasure. And I thought, well, I would do the opposite. I would try and grasp for unhappiness. Thinking, okay, how do I do that? And I'm not trying to make myself unhappy. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make myself aware. So I kind of came up with this little experiment. And the rules were that, because I found that, for example, I planned treats for myself, like little graspy treats. I could think, this chocolate biscuit, I'll have that later. Or after work, I think I'll watch some TV. I'll sit down and watch, I plan these little treats. And if I didn't get my treat, if the kids interrupted me or someone ate the biscuits, I'd be really angry and not very skillful. So I thought, okay, so let's try with those little treats that I'm always grabbing. So how can I stop doing that? So the rules of this experiment were that whenever I planned this little treat in my head, knew that I was going to be grasping for something, I had to do the opposite. So whenever I planned that little treat, there's a biscuit in the fridge, I would have to have a piece of fruit instead. Or when I planned to watch some TV, I had to do something productive instead. So, for example, one day I found myself with some time off miraculously, and I decided, yes, I'm going to watch some TV, put my feet up, and then I remembered, I'm doing the experiment. So I thought, okay, we'll do something productive. So I sat outside in the sun and reflected and started to write this talk. So I found that really, really beneficial. Can you hear me? Are you okay there? Good. A little bit speaking up. So I'm guessing you would like to know the results of this experiment of mine. And I'm pleased to report that it really went brilliantly for about 2 or 3 days. And then after that, I got lazy or I got bored and just. So then I took a break and thought, right, come on, let's do it again. So I tried it again. And it works for me in some circumstances, you know, for a couple of days. But this is what I found. I found that I really easily forget to do it and forget to stick to it. I found that my initial feeling was resentment, that I'm not going to get my treat. But then when I did the thing that I thought would bring me unhappiness, I actually enjoyed it. My first impulse was to gain it. So I'd say, okay, fine, I'll have an apple, even though knowing that biscuits still, I think I might have it. So yeah, trying to work around. That's what the brain does, always does that. Another thing I found is that I was worried that I might be boring and being not fun. I found that I felt better afterwards and actually felt better about myself afterwards. So like one of them was whenever I felt like I just did not want to clean the house or do the chores, push that away. I thought, right, okay, you've got to do it now. So I'd clean that, and I ended up with a clean house most of the week, and it's just, I felt so much better. So I'm still trying to work out how to do this. I'm not suggesting you do this. I'm just saying this is how I play with my mind and trying to become aware of things. So I'm still trying to work it out and do something like this without feeling like I'm just being a fun sucker, someone that sucks the fun. Because I'm not saying don't have treats, I'm not saying don't eat chocolate biscuits. I'm just saying it's something I go, oh, and let's look at that. So the 3 points to make it about this experiment are that this exercise is not an antidote to grasping, pushing. The Buddha said that the antidote to grasping and aversion is generosity and loving kindness. So I think the Buddha knows a little bit more than me. Listen to him, not necessarily me. And I'm not pursuing unhappiness in order to get happiness. That's not what I'm doing. I'm doing it so that I'm aware when I'm grasping and when I'm pushing away and trying to eradicate that or minimize that as a driving force in my life. The second point is that these little treats and things, they're not necessarily unskillful. They're not necessarily unhelpful or unhealthy or unwholesome. They're just getting in the way of deepening my practice. And the third point is the things that I'm grasping after in this little experiment are things, but it's not always just things that we grasp or push away. It's also mental states. So we grasp after affection, attention, feeling important, feeling like we belong, and we push away unpleasant feelings like loneliness and shame. So I'm kind of naturally now just starting to expand on that. So even on the train, I was thinking about a project at work that is about to go to another team, and I was thinking, oh, I hope they don't, pick up any mistakes that I've made. Pushing away that feeling of, oh, I'm not important, I'm not my work, I'm not good enough, I'm not clever, you know what I mean? Thinking, no, actually, let's turn to that. I hope there is something, well, I hope so, there is something, but I'm okay with them seeing my vulnerabilities and just relax about it. And actually, I feel a lot better about that. So in summary, what I'm encouraging you to think about is these two aspects. Watch what you're pulled towards, like treats like me, and the desire to feel important, and just watch what you're pushing away, things, people, situations that make you uncomfortable. And then try, when possible, just to loosen up around it, not trying to chase the pleasant and don't resist the unpleasant, and just watch what happens. So now I'd like to dig a little deeper into this idea of happiness. And I know this is crazy, but I actually believe there is a time and a place when I will be entirely happy. I mean, it's ridiculous, right? There is a time, if I practice hard enough and if I'm calm enough and if I'm good enough, that eventually I will be always calm. I will be always compassionate. I will never yell at the kids. I'll never lose my cool. I'll be totally accepting of difficulties and suffering. And there is a little part of me that actually believes that, which is completely unrealistic. And it's not possible to achieve, but sometimes, but I think, and I don't think I'm alone, I think we live as if that's possible. It's the belief that we can have a life without suffering that causes the suffering. It's the expectation. The expectation that we won't suffer that adds to the suffering. We expect things to work out. And when they don't, we get upset. So, we get upset when we're in a traffic jam, or we get upset when kids break something, because we expected that our life would work out. A friend said to me recently that this brilliant idea of saying to yourself, well, what did you expect? What were you expecting would happen when these things in life happen that we would normally push away? Just look at them and say, well, what did you expect? You're stuck in a traffic jam. You were driving a car in traffic. At some point, you're going to get stuck in a traffic jam. What did you expect? You have children. Their minds and bodies are developing. They break. Kids are clumsy. They're going to break things. What did you expect? So I really like that idea of helping to loosen up that idea of pushing things away when we don't like them by saying, well, it's to be expected. That's normal. That's life. So we looked at how and why we chase happiness. So let's look at what we run away from. Let's look a bit more at that pushing away. So mostly we're pushing away unpleasant feelings and situations. But there is a move, I think, in society to actually experience discomfort, because possibly, maybe, discomfort could be good for us. So I'm thinking of things like the Wim Hof method is very popular. It's a guy that proposes that you experience discomfort through the cold water, cold exposure, because it gives really good health benefits, like improving your immune system and increasing endorphins, balancing hormone levels and improving sleep quality. Another example of perhaps how discomfort could be good for us can be found in what we call the blue zones. And these are areas in the world where there are pockets of people who are living to really long lives, really vast ages, so 80s, 90s, into their hundreds, and they're living really well. And these people, they all do some form of physical labour into their 80s and their 90s and beyond. They grow gardens, they walk up and down steep streets, and they don't have mechanical conveniences for the house work and the yard work. So they live well for a long time. So what I'm suggesting is that we think deeply about when we're pushing things away, why are we pushing them away? What is it we don't like? Because when we turn away from discomfort, we lose some really great opportunities. So we lose the potential of seeing discomfort as an opportunity to practice and also to strengthen the mind. And turning away from discomfort loses the opportunity of getting used to that feeling of being uncomfortable and to learning to be okay with that. And finally, what I'd like to have a think about is something just that I call happy enough. So this talk was entitled The Pursuit of Unhappiness, but of course I'm not suggesting that you try to make yourself unhappy. I just like the title. And it's a way of questioning what we're pursuing in terms of happiness and why. So I have this quote, I don't know where it's from. It says, eventually we turn away from chasing after every little comfort, turn away from looking outward. We begin to recognise that actually we already have everything we need to be happy. In parenting, recently there's been a movement called Good Enough Parenting. So it's encouraging people to stop trying to attain that perfect parent goal, that knowing that we are going to make mistakes, that we are never going to be the perfect parent, and say, okay, that's enough. What I'm doing, it's enough. It's good enough. The way it is, with all its faults, I'm trying my best. And I'd suggest that it might be time for a happy enough movement, where we stop the pursuit of happiness and accept life exactly as it is, with all its icky moments, with all its tapestry of things that we like and that we don't like. And let's try to accept that we already are happy enough as we are, and we don't need more happiness. I remember a comment Damanaro once made in one of the discussion groups, and he noticed that he would stay up late of a night, just trying to grasp the last bit of pleasure out of the day rather than go to sleep like he knew he should. He had such great awareness of his mind. So I'm saying let's all try to have that great awareness to let go of the grasping for pleasure and happiness, and to actually live the third precept, to live a life of stillness, simplicity, and contentment. So I'm just going to summarize now what I've spoken about. I looked at greed, hatred, and delusion as the poisons that we need to stop spreading in our mind. We stop spreading them by paying attention to them. I suggested we could stop grasping or pushing away and notice if we're doing that because we're trying to build this wall of happiness. We think we can actually achieve that. Do we have an expectation that we will be happy? And does that expectation actually cause unhappiness? Are there benefits to experiencing discomfort? And then the idea of happiness. And that's my talk. So we always have questions. So we'll break into discussion groups now, and I'm just going to give you the questions before we do that. But please feel free to disagree with anything I said. These are just my thoughts, and I don't think that these are right. This is just what's in my head at the moment. So I'm going to give you two quotes and discuss. The first one is from Maitreya Bandhu, from The Journey and the Guide. He says, we need to ask, where do I believe my happiness comes from? A haircut, back rub, a jive club, or a designer, it actually says that, yeah, or a designer drug. The Buddha said that it's positive emotion that makes us happy, but do we really believe that? And if we do our actions bear that out? Or are we mainly going for the quick fix? So discuss that. That's the positive side. That's the grasping. And the pushing away one. This is Yongay Mingyu Rinpoche in Turning Confusion into Clarity. Dukkha describes a mind that is never completely at ease, always wanting things to be different to how they are. Discuss.